The terrifying medical practices of the American Civil War. You've been shot. Somewhere between the screaming and the black powder smoke, you realize the real horror hasn't started yet. Welcome to Civil War medicine, the beginning of your nightmare. Your ears are ringing. The world seems muffled and distant as you lie in the mud, staring up at a sky that's too peaceful for what's happening around you. It started as an ordinary morning. Breakfast hardtack. So stale, you had to soak it in coffee to avoid breaking your teeth. Then came the order to advance. Now you're here, a Union soldier with a mini ball lodged somewhere in your thigh. The pain hasn't fully registered yet. That's the mercy of shock. Got another live one here. Someone shouts, and rough hands grab you under the armpits. Your leg drags uselessly through churned-up earth, as two men, fellow soldiers, not medical personnel, haul you toward what passes for medical care in this godforsaken place. You want to scream, but your throat constricts with fear. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. The surgeons with their bone saws and their blood-slick aprons, the piles of limbs stacked like cordwood outside the medical tents, the men who go in whole and come out less than whole, if they come out at all. The battlefield injury, a study in destruction. The mini ball that struck you isn't like the round musket balls of earlier wars. This conical lead projectile, adopted widely during the Civil War, is a revolutionary instrument of destruction. When it strikes human flesh, it doesn't just pierce, it tumbles and expands, shattering bone into countless fragments and pulverizing tissue into a mess of hamburger meat. As you're dragged across the battlefield, every jostle sends lightning bolts of agony up your spine as these bone fragments shift and tear at surrounding tissue. Don't worry, boy. Old Sawbones will fix you. Up, one of your rescuers says with a hollow laugh. You've heard that nickname before, the darkly humorous term soldiers use for surgeons. These medical men earned their grim reputation through necessity, not cruelty. With up to 60,000 amputations performed throughout the war, surgeons spent their days quite literally sawing through bones. There's no ambulance service yet, at least not at the beginning of the war. If you're lucky and you aren't, you might be transported in a two-wheeled ambulance cart. More likely, you're being carried on a stretcher or, as in your case, dragged unceremoniously by your fellow soldiers. The shrieks and moans of wounded men form a grotesque symphony around you. Some call for their mothers, others beg for water. A few, the luckiest, have already died. The field hospital, hell's waiting room. The smell hits you first, not just the tang of blood, though there's plenty of that, metallic and thick in the air. It's the rot, the gangrene, the festering wounds and unwashed bodies, the stench of human waste and vomit. Flies buzz in thick clouds, moving from open wounds to surgeons' instruments with industrious indifference. Your bearers drop you unceremoniously on the ground, outside a large tent. Around you, wounded men lie in various states of despair. Some whimper, others stare silently, already hollow-eyed, as if their souls have fled, leaving only their damaged bodies behind. You notice with detached horror that you're lying in mud mixed with blood. It squelches under your back, warm and sticky. "Wait your turn," a harried orderly says as he hurries past. Surgeons are working through the line. Gut wounds and chest. Shots wait over there. He points to a separate area where men lie quietly, largely unattended. You understand immediately those men are expected to die. There's no point wasting precious medical resources on the doomed, the Civil War field. Hospital is a place of brutal triage. With thousands of casualties from major battles, doctors developed a system not unlike modern emergency medicine. Those with mortal wounds were set aside to die in as much comfort as could be managed. Those with minor wounds waited. Those with limb wounds requiring amputation, men like you were prioritized for surgery. The medical theory, science in its infancy. As you wait, drifting in and out of consciousness, you overhear a medical officer instructing younger surgeons. Their medical theories would strike modern ears as medieval. Many doctors still believe in the four humours theory of medicine, that health depends on the balance of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Treatments like bloodletting were still practiced, though thankfully falling out of favour. The medical knowledge of Civil War surgeons exists in a strange twilight between superstition and science. The germ theory of disease isn't yet established. Louis Pasteur's work is happening concurrently in Europe, but hasn't revolutionized American medicine yet. Surgeons move from patient to patient without washing their hands. Instruments are, at best, wiped clean with a cloth or dipped in water, never sterilized. Your surgeon likely attended medical school, but his education would be shocking by modern standards. Many medical schools required just 2 years of study, with only the second involving actual clinical practice. Some physicians had never performed surgery before the war thrust them into battlefield hospitals. The sawbones approaches. Your turn for treatment. You're jolted from your thoughts as to orderlies lift you onto a rough wooden table. The surgeon approaches, his apron so saturated with blood it appears black rather than red. His sleeves are rolled up, revealing forearms spattered with gore. He hasn't washed his hands between patients. Why would he? The concept of antiseptic surgery won't exist until Joseph Lister's work becomes widely accepted after the war. What have we got here? The surgeon asks, not really expecting an answer from you. He cuts away your blood-soaked pant leg with practiced efficiency. You catch a glimpse of your wound and immediately wish you hadn't. The flesh is pulped, with bone fragments visibly protruding through torn muscle. The surgeon probes the wound with his fingers, not with sterile gloves, of course, but with bare hands that have been inside the bodies of dozens of men before you today. This digital exploration is the primary diagnostic tool. X-rays won't be discovered for another 30 years. Femurs shattered, he announces to no one in particular. We'll take it at the hip. Your blood turns to ice. Amputation at the hip is among the most dangerous procedures, with mortality rates exceeding 80%. But you have no choice. Without removing the limb, infection, particularly gangrene, will almost certainly kill you. Chloroform, the surgeon calls, and an assistant appears with a cone-shaped cloth. Despite popular belief, Civil War surgeons did use anesthesia when available. Chloroform was preferred over ether because it worked faster and wasn't flammable, an important consideration in battlefield conditions. Count backward from 10, son, the assistant says, placing the cone over your face and dripping the sweet liquid onto it. You make it to 7 before darkness claims you. The amputation, butchery with purpose. You don't feel the amputation itself. That's the blessing of chloroform, but you do hear things as you drift in and out of consciousness. The surgeon works with terrifying speed. Time is his enemy as much as infection. With hundreds of wounded waiting, he must complete your amputation in under 10 minutes. First, he applies a tourniquet above the site to control bleeding. Then he makes circular cuts through skin and muscle with a gleaming Lister knife. named ironically for the same Joseph Lister, who will later pioneer antiseptic surgery. The assistant retracts the severed tissue, pulling it upward to expose the femur. The surgeon takes up his bone saw, the infamous tool that gave him his sawbones nickname, and begins to cut through your thigh bone with practiced strokes. The crack and scrape of saw against bone is audible even through your chemical stupor. Once the bone is severed, the surgeon uses forceps to pull out major blood vessels and tie them off with silk thread or horsehair. He trims the nerve endings with scissors, pulling them down and cutting them short so they'll retract into the stump, away from the incision line. Finally, he creates skin flaps from the remaining tissue, shaping them to cover the stump. This flap method provides cushioning for a future prosthetic device. The entire procedure, from first incision to final stitch, takes about 8 minutes. The surgeon has already moved on to the next patient, as an orderly carries your newly detached leg to the growing pile outside. Your limb joins hundreds of others, in what soldiers darkly refer to as the limb pile, a gruesome monument to the war's told post-operative care. Survival is optional. You awaken hours later on a straw mattress in a corner of the field hospital. The chloroform has worn off, leaving you in a universe of pain. There are no 4 painkillers, no carefully calibrated morphine drips. If you're lucky, an orderly might give you an opium pill or a swig of whiskey. The stump where your leg used to be is wrapped in bandages already soaking through with blood and serum. The surgeon has done his part, keeping you alive through the procedure. Now your survival depends largely on luck and your body's natural resilience. Around you, other men moan and cry out. Some speak to people who aren't there, the delirium, a fever setting in as infection takes hold. Others lie ominously silent. The air is thick with the smell of rot and human waste. Sanitation is primitive at best. Bedpans are emptied infrequently. Bandages are changed only when absolutely necessary. Flies crawl freely over your wound and those of the men around you. In the corner, a soldier with gangrene screams as black tissue is cut away from his festering stump without anesthesia. The putrid smell makes your stomach heave. The unlikely heroes, nurses amid the horror. A woman approaches your bedside, her apron nearly as blood-soaked as the surgeon's was. She's one of the many female nurses who have volunteered to serve in this hell on earth. Perhaps she's been inspired by Clara Barton, the angel of the battlefield, who travels from conflict to conflict, providing care and comfort to wounded soldiers on both sides. Before the war, nursing wasn't considered appropriate work for women, but the sheer scale of casualties has made such social niceties irrelevant. These women, many with no formal medical training, have become essential to the war effort. They change bandages, administer medicines, write letters home for dying soldiers, and provide a touch of humanity in the most inhumane conditions. Water, she asks, holding a tin cup to your lips. The water is lukewarm and tastes faintly of metal, but it's the most wonderful thing you've ever tasted. Am I going to die, you ask, your voice a cracked whisper. She doesn't answer directly. She's seen too much to offer false hope. Rest, she says instead. I'll check on you again soon. As she moves away, you notice her helping a black soldier on a separate pallet. The medical care provided to black troops is often inferior, with poorer staffing and fewer supplies. Black soldiers frequently die from wounds that white soldiers survive, victims of systemic racism embedded even in wartime. Medical care, the waiting game, infection or recovery. Now begins the true test of survival. In the days following amputation, infection is the greatest threat. Without antibiotics or proper antiseptic practices, bacteria flourish in your wound. Types of infection include pyemia, blood poisoning characterized by multiple abscesses throughout the body. This infection is almost always fatal. Hospital gangrene, a rapidly spreading infection that literally rots flesh away, gives off a distinctive, sickly sweet odor that experienced nurses can identify immediately. If it develops, your only hope is further amputation higher up the limb. Erysipelas, a streptococcal skin infection causing red, swollen patches that spread rapidly, in some cases. Surgeons apply bromine solutions to wounds to prevent gangrene. One of the few effective antiseptic treatments available during the Civil War. Though painful, this treatment significantly reduces mortality rates when used properly. As you lie on your filthy mattress, drifting between consciousness and delirium, you develop a fever. Is it the beginnings of infection, or merely your body's response to trauma? There's no way to know, and little that can be done either way in the bed next to yours. A man whose arm was amputated yesterday has developed the telltale black tissue of gangrene. Surgeons rush to perform a second, higher amputation. They don't bother with chloroform this time. The supply is running low, and they need to work quickly. His screams echo through the tent. As they saw through his shoulder joint, you turn away, wondering if you'll be next. The bigger picture, disease as the real killer, while your focus is understandably on your wound. It's worth noting that you're actually more likely to die from disease than from combat injuries. For every soldier killed in battle during the Civil War, two died from disease. The crowded, unsanitary conditions of army camps are perfect breeding grounds for dysentery, known as the Tennessee Quickstep or Virginia Quickstep. This causes severe diarrhea that can kill through dehydration. Typhoid fever, spread through contaminated water and food. This bacterial infection causes high fever, weakness, and often proves fatal. Malaria, rampant in swampy areas, particularly in the South. Smallpox, still a deadly threat in the 1860s. Pneumonia, a common killer, especially in winter months. The fact that you're in a field hospital with an amputated leg actually gives you better odds than many of your comrades. Slowly wasting away from intestinal diseases. Back in camp, evacuating the wounded, onwards to more sophisticated care. 3 days after your amputation, you're deemed stable enough for transport to a general hospital farther from the front lines. This is a mixed blessing. While general hospitals have better supplies and more consistent care, the journey itself can kill you. If you're a Union soldier, you might be loaded onto a hospital train, a relatively new innovation in military medicine. The Confederacy, with fewer resources, relies more heavily on commandeered buildings near railroad lines. The journey is excruciating. Every jolt of the train sends spasms of pain through your body. Your bandages, changed infrequently, are soaked through with blood and pus. The fever hasn't broken. By the time you reach the general hospital, you're barely conscious. This larger facility is an improvement over the field hospital, but only by degrees. It may be a converted church, school, or private home, or, if you're fortunate, one of the newer pavilion-style hospitals being built specifically for war casualties. These pavilion hospitals, with their emphasis on ventilation and segregation of patients by disease type, represent one of the war's significant medical advances. Still, conditions remain primitive by modern standards. Beds are crowded together. Cross-contamination is rampant. The doctors are overworked, tending to hundreds of patients with minimal assistance. But here, at least, you have a better chance of receiving regular food, clean water, and somewhat more attentive care. The Sanitary Commission, civilian heroes. Your odds of survival improve slightly thanks to the efforts of the United States Sanitary Commission, a civilian relief agency formed in 1861. These volunteers, many of them women, work tirelessly to improve conditions in military hospitals. They provide supplies, organize medical services, and advocate for better sanitation practices. Their efforts have already saved countless lives. By promoting clean and healthy conditions in army camps and hospitals, they've helped reduce the spread of disease. They raise money, distribute supplies, and educate military personnel about basic hygiene. Revolutionary concepts in an era when the germ theory of disease is still being developed. Sanitary Commission volunteer brings you a clean shirt and actual food. Not army rations, but real bread and soup prepared by civilians. This small touch of humanity feels like a miracle after the horrors you've endured. You're lucky, she tells you as she helps you sit up. We lost 12 men on the train. You might just make it. You're not sure if that qualifies as lucky, but you take what comfort you can as the first part of your ordeal comes to a close. You drift into an uneasy sleep, wondering what horrors or mercies tomorrow might bring. The war rages on outside the hospital walls, claiming more victims for the surgeons' tables. But for now, you've survived the initial gauntlet of Civil War medicine. Whether that's a blessing or a curse remains to be seen. But you're not dead yet. That part comes later. The General Hospital, a palace of pain. You've survived the first week. Congratulations. The fever comes and goes, painting your nights with delirious visions and your days with a foggy haze. Your stump throbs with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of what you've lost. The skin around the stitches is red and hot to the touch. Inflammation, but not yet infection. Not yet. The General Hospital you've been transferred to is a converted hotel in Washington, D.C. It's once elegant ballroom, now lined with identical iron beds. Moans provide the constant background music, punctuated by occasional screams when a dressing is changed or a surgeon probes a festering wound. The windows are kept open regardless of weather, a primitive attempt at ventilation that leaves you shivering under thin blankets. Another beautiful day in paradise, says the soldier in the next bed, a cavalryman who lost both legs to a cannonball. His face is gaunt, eyes sunken, but somehow he maintains a sardonic humor. Just think, before the war we'd be plowing fields or working in factories. Now we're living like gentlemen of leisure. You try to laugh, but it comes out as a groan. The hospital hierarchy, your worth in medical attention, the care you receive, depends heavily on your rank and race. As a common infantryman, you're just one of hundreds. Officers occupy private rooms where they receive more frequent medical attention and better food. Their wives sometimes visit, bringing homemade delicacies and fresh clothing. The smell of their perfume lingers in the air, an alien scent in this temple of bodily fluids and decay. If you were a Confederate soldier with the same injury, you'd likely be in worse shape. The Southern medical system, strained by blockades and dwindling resources, struggles to provide even basic care. Confederate surgeons often operate without chloroform, using whiskey as a poor substitute. Their hospitals lack adequate bedding, medicine, and food. The mortality rates are correspondingly higher, and if you were black, the 54th Massachusetts and other colored regiments received the worst care of all, segregated into separate wards or entirely different facilities. Black soldiers die at significantly higher rates from identical wounds. Their amputations are performed more hastily, their recovery monitored less carefully. Even in the midst of a war ostensibly fought over their freedom, systemic racism determines who lives and who dies. But you're a white Union soldier, so you receive the standard care, which is to say, intermittent attention from overworked surgeons, and the ministrations of volunteer nurses, whose compassion often exceeds their medical knowledge. The daily routine, suffering as schedule. Your days acquire a grotesque rhythm. At dawn, orderlies move through the ward, emptying bedpans and distributing hardtack soaked in coffee, easier to eat for men too weak to chew. Surgeons make their rounds mid-morning, unwrapping bandages to inspect wounds with clinical detachment. The good doctors wear expressions of genuine concern. The exhausted ones, eyes empty after months of unrelenting horror, go through the motions mechanically. Slight suppuration, good color, your surgeon mumbles, poking at your stump with a pencil. Continue current treatment. The current treatment consists of fresh bandages twice daily and the occasional application of bromine solution when supplies permit. There's no physical therapy, no counseling for the trauma you've endured. Science hasn't yet recognized the psychological wounds of war. Afternoons drag endlessly. Some men read donated books or newspapers. Others write letters home, carefully, omitting the worst details of their conditions. Many just stare at the ceiling, lost in memories or numbed by laudanum. The opiate dulls pain, but leaves minds foggy and bowels constipated, yet another indignity to endure. Nights are the worst. Darkness amplifies every sound, the creaking of bed frames as men shift position, the bubbling breath of pneumonia victims, the whispered prayers of the dying. Sleep comes in fitful bursts, interrupted by your own pain or the cries of others. Sometimes you wake to find the man next to you has died during the night, his bed empty by morning, his meager possessions already distributed among the living. The phantom limb, you're absent. Friend, one morning you wake feeling an intense itch. In your left foot, the foot that's no longer there. You reach down instinctively before remembering. The sensation is so vivid, so real, that for a moment you're convinced the amputation was just a nightmare. Phantom limb, explains the cavalryman. Got it in both my legs. Sometimes they itch. Sometimes they burn. Yesterday I could have sworn someone was driving nails into my right foot. The one that's been fertilizing some Virginia cornfield for 2 months now. This cruel trick of the nervous system becomes your constant companion. Your brain, unable to accept the sudden absence of limb, creates sensations where none should exist. Sometimes it's merely strange, an itch that can't be scratched. Other times it's excruciating, burning pain or cramping in muscles that no longer exist. The surgeons have no explanation for this phenomenon. Some suggest it's purely psychological, hysteria or malingering. Others theorize that nerves at the stump site continue to send signals the brain misinterprets. Whatever the cause, there's no effective treatment. You simply endure, adding it to the catalogue of sufferings that define your new existence. The women. In white angels amid the carnage, the hospital's saving grace is its nurses. Some are nuns from Catholic orders, their habits swapped for simple dresses with aprons. Others are society women who've left comfortable homes to serve. A few are former school teachers, like Clara Barton, who found their true calling in this crucible of suffering. Unlike the surgeons, who focus on wounds, the nurses tend to the whole patient. They bring cool cloths for fevered brows, help men write letters home, read aloud from books and newspapers. They smuggle in small comforts, real coffee instead of chicory, actual sugar instead of sorghum. Your family sent a letter, says a nurse with kind eyes and calloused hands. Her name is Sarah, and though she's probably only 30, the months in this place have etched permanent lines around her mouth. Would you like me to read it to you? She sits beside your bed, unfolding the paper carefully. Your mother's handwriting, shaky but determined, fills the page with news from home. The spring planting is done. Your younger brother has enlisted despite her protests. The church held a special prayer service for the wounded. She doesn't ask when you'll return. Everyone understands that such questions have no certain answers. Now, Sarah reads without rushing, giving you this small gift of connection to the world beyond these walls of suffering. When she finishes, she offers to write a reply, taking your dictation with patient attention. These women work 14-hour days, their skirts heavy with bloodstains, their hands raw from carbolic acid used to clean wounds. They witness horrors that would break most souls, yet return each morning with compassionate smiles intact. In a war defined by men's violence, they represent humanity's better nature and save countless lives through their care. The unexpected survivors, maggots as medical allies. 2 weeks into your hospital stay, the inevitable happens. Despite all precautions, your stump develops infection. The skin around the sutures turns an angry red, then purple. Pus seeps from the incision line, carrying the unmistakable stench of rotting flesh. The surgeon examines you with a frown. Gangrene, he pronounces. We'll have to open it up, debride the dead tissue. Without chloroform, the hospital's supply is reserved for amputations. They cut open your stump. The pain is indescribable, white-hot and all-consuming. You bite down on a leather strap until your jaw aches, tears streaming silently down your face. The rotting tissue they remove smells so foul that even the hardened orderlies gag. They leave the wound open to drain, packing it with lint soaked in various solutions. Bromine one day, dilute acid the next. Whatever the surgeon believes might halt the infection's spread, nothing helps. The gangrene continues its relentless advance, claiming more flesh each day. Then something strange happens. A nurse, changing your dressing, discovers tiny white larvae wriggling in the wound. Maggots, in earlier times. They would have been immediately removed, seen as a disgusting consequence of poor hygiene. But observant Civil War surgeons have noticed something remarkable. Wounds infested with these fly larvae often heal better than those kept clean. Leave them, the surgeon instructs after examining your stump. They're eating only the dead flesh, leaving the healthy tissue intact. Better than any knife. It's revolting to know that insects are feasting on your body, yet within days the improvement is undeniable. The wound begins to produce healthy granulation tissue, bright red, clean-smelling. The maggots, nature's microsurgeons, have accomplished what human medicine could not. This accidental discovery becomes one of the war's most significant medical advancements. Decades later, medical science will confirm what Civil War doctors learned through desperate necessity. Certain maggot species secrete enzymes that dissolve dead tissue while leaving healthy cells untouched, and produce natural antimicrobial that help fight infection. The pharmacopoeia, medicines real and imagined. Your maggot treatment continues, supplemented by the hospital's limited pharmaceutical arsenal. Medicine in the 1860s exists in a transitional state between folk remedies. In modern pharmacology, some treatments work, though doctors don't fully understand why. Others are useless or actively harmful. Quinine, extracted from cinchona bark, effectively treats malaria but is often administered for any fever. Morphine and opium relieve pain but create dependency. Mercury compounds, prescribed for everything from syphilis to constipation, slowly poison patients. Calomel, a mercury chloride compound, causes excessive salivation, mouth ulcers, and loose teeth, leading to the soldiers saying that you can always recognize a veteran by his rotting gums. Medicine time, announces an orderly, bringing a tray of small paper cups. Each contains a different colored powder or pill. You've stopped asking what they are. The explanations rarely make sense, and refusal isn't an option anyway. You swallow them all with water that tastes faintly of copper. Some leave a bitter aftertaste that lingers for hours. Others cause stomach cramps or diarrhea. Just one more indignity in a place where privacy doesn't exist. Men use bedpans in full view of the ward, the sounds and smells adding to the general miasma of misery in the bed across from yours. A man receiving mercury treatment spits constantly into a basin, his gums bleeding, his speech slurred around loosening teeth. The cure seems worse than the disease, but desperation drives both doctors and patients to try anything that might help. The psychological toll, minds under siege. As weeks pass, your physical wound slowly heals. The psychological wounds prove more resistant to treatment. You startle at sudden noises. A dropped bedpan sends you diving under covers, convinced it's artillery fire. Nightmares plague your sleep. Replaying the battle in vivid detail or inventing new horrors your conscious mind couldn't imagine, no. One calls it post-traumatic stress disorder. That term won't exist for another century. Instead, they use words, like soldier's heart or nostalgia, to describe the constellation of symptoms. Anxiety, flashbacks, emotional numbness, irritability, difficulty sleeping. Some doctors consider it a physical condition caused by cardiovascular strain during battle. Others dismiss it as simple cowardice or malingering. The man in the bed to your right screams every night, trapped in dreams of a bayonet charge that left him the sole survivor of his company. During the day he barely speaks, his eyes fixed on middle distance, seeing something the rest of you cannot. The doctors prescribe bromides and cold water therapy, useless against the demons that haunt him. Shell shock, mutters an older surgeon as he passes. Seen it in the Mexican War, too. Some men's nerves just can't take it. Nothing to be done. But there's a deeper understanding among the patients themselves. You recognize the 1,000-yard stare, the flinch at loud noises, the night sweats and trembling hands, because you experience them too. Without formal diagnosis or treatment, soldiers develop their own coping mechanisms, dark humor, shared stories, small rituals that provide a sense of control in a world that has proven itself chaotic and brutal. Remember who you were before. Advises a sergeant missing both arms, his uniform sleeve pinned neatly to his shoulders. Not just the fighting. Think about fishing with your PA or that girl who smiled at you at church socials. That's still real. This place isn't the whole world. You try to follow his advice, summoning memories of home like talismans against the darkness. Sometimes it helps. Other times, the contrast between then and now is too painful to bear. The innovative edge. Medicine advancing through necessity despite its horrors, or perhaps because of them, civil war. Medicine represents a period of significant advancement. The scale of suffering forces innovation at an accelerated pace. Hospitals develop new administrative systems to track thousands of patients. Ambulance corps improve evacuation procedures, dramatically reducing the time between injury and treatment. Surgeons perfect techniques through grim repetition, their mortality rates dropping as their experience grows. You benefit from these advancements without fully recognizing them. The systematic triage that prioritized your treatment, the anesthesia that spared you the worst pain of amputation, the hospital design that provides better ventilation than earlier facilities, all represent improvements over previous wars. Even prosthetics improve rapidly. One morning, a man arrives with a cart of artificial limbs, measuring patients for custom fittings. The crude peg legs of earlier conflicts have been replaced by articulated devices with joints that approximate natural movement. They're still primitive by modern standards, heavy, uncomfortable, difficult to control, but they offer something precious: the possibility of independence. Government pays for your first one, the prosthetic maker tells you, measuring your residual limb with courtesy of the US Congress. They're calling it the Great American Benefaction. Fancy name for trying to put you back together after they got you blown apart. His cynicism matches your own, but beneath it lies a kernel of hope. Perhaps you won't spend your life as a cripple, dependent on family, charity, or consigned to a soldier's home. Perhaps there's still a future worth imagining. The unlikely brotherhood, bonds forged in suffering as spring turns to summer. The hospital ward becomes its own society, with unwritten rules and complex relationships. Men from different states, different backgrounds, even occasionally different armies find common ground in their shared suffering. The cavalryman who lost both legs teaches you how to manage phantom pain by visualizing the missing limb and mentally relaxing it. You help a young private from Maine learn to write with his left hand after losing his right. Soldiers share tobacco, extra rations, letters from home. They play cards awkwardly with bandaged hands, tell increasingly exaggerated stories of their exploits, debate politics with the fervor of men who've paid for their opinions in blood. They mourn together when one of their number succumbs, maintaining solemn silence as orderlies remove the body. Never thought I'd count a Massachusetts man as a friend. Draws a recovering Confederate, captured at Gettysburg and too badly wounded to be sent to a prison camp. My pa would roll in his grave. Your pa didn't spend 3 months staring at the same ceiling, you reply, passing him your tobacco pouch. Changes a man's perspective. These bonds, forged in extremis, often prove stronger than pre-war friendships. Who else could understand what you've experienced? Who else has lived in this twilight world between battlefield and home, between life and death? Even as you heal physically, you sense that you're becoming someone different, someone your family might not recognize when you finally return, but return you will. As summer wanes, the surgeon examines your stump with rare approval. Good healing, he pronounces. Minimal scarring. You're ready for discharge and your prosthetic fitting. Congratulations, soldier. You've survived. The words should bring joy, but instead you feel a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also apprehension. What awaits you beyond these walls? What place exists for a one-legged veteran in a world that values men for their physical labor? And how will you explain what you've seen, what you've endured, to people whose idea of suffering is a bad harvest or a toothache? Don't worry, says the cavalryman, reading your expression. We're not the first broken men this country has made. Won't be the last either. You learn to live with it. As you prepare for discharge, gathering your few possessions and the paperwork that entitles you to a pension, you take a final look around the ward. New arrivals have already filled the beds of those who left or died. The cycle continues unbroken. A machine consuming whole men and spitting out fragments. You're not dead yet, but part of you died on that battlefield, and another part in this hospital. What remains is something new, something tempered by pain and illuminated by the strange clarity that comes from looking death in the face and surviving. As you limp toward the hospital door, leaning on a temporary crutch, you wonder what awaits. In the third act of your journey, the return to a home that exists now only in memory, to a life you'll have to reinvent with your remaining limbs and your permanently altered mind. But that story, the story of after, is a different kind of horror. The aftermath, broken men in a healing nation. The train rattles beneath you, each jolt sending pain through your healing stump. You're heading home, discharge papers tucked inside your jacket pocket, alongside the government voucher for your prosthetic leg. 3 months in hospital hell have left you gaunt, your uniform hanging loose on a frame that's lost 20 pounds of muscle. The other passengers steal glances when they think you aren't looking. Their expressions a mixture of pity, curiosity, and discomfort. "Thank you for your service," says an elderly gentleman across the aisle, the words awkward and insufficient. You nod without speaking. What could you possibly say? That you soiled yourself in terror as the rebels charged. That you still hear the wet, sucking sound of the bone saw. That you watched boys younger than you die whimpering for their mothers. You turn to stare out the window instead, watching America roll by and America healing its divisions, even as you struggle to heal your body. The war isn't quite over, but everyone knows it soon will be. The question that hangs in the air, unspoken. What happens to men like you when the fighting stops? The homecoming, heroes and burdens. The station platform is crowded when you arrive. News of returning soldiers brings out the whole town. Your mother spots you first, her hand flying to her mouth as she registers your crutch, the empty space where your left leg should be. Then she's running, pushing through the crowd, her arms wrapping around you with desperate strength. "My boy," she whispers against your chest. "My boy came home." Behind her, your father stands, rigid, eyes wet but face composed. He was too old to fight, stayed home to run the farm with your younger brothers. Now he reaches for your rucksack, slinging it over his own shoulder in a small gesture that acknowledges your new limitations without directly addressing them. "Wagons this way," he says gruffly. "Got the spring seat padded for you." The crowd parts as you make your way through. Neighbors and childhood friends calling greetings that you answer with nods and forced smiles. Their faces blur together, their words washing over you like meaningless noise. Everything seems simultaneously too bright, too loud, too fast, and strangely distant, as if you're watching your homecoming through the wrong end of a telescope. A young woman steps forward, Mary, who you courted before enlisting. Her letter, arrived in the hospital 4 weeks ago, gently explaining that she'd accepted a proposal from the blacksmith's son. He has both legs, the letter didn't say, but clearly implied. Her eyes now avoid your stump as she welcomes you home. Her discomfort palpable. The farm looks smaller than you remember, the house shabbier. During the short wagon ride, your father fills the silence with talk of crops and weather, carefully avoiding any mention of your injury or the war. Your mother keeps reaching back from her seat to touch your arm, as if reassuring herself you're really there. Your bedroom remains exactly as you left it, frozen in time like a museum exhibit dedicated to a boy who no longer exists. You stand in the doorway, leaning on your crutch, suddenly unsure if you belong in this space anymore. Supper in an hour, your mother says, misinterpreting your hesitation. I've made all your favorites. You thank her automatically. The words hollow in your mouth. How do you explain that food tastes like ashes now? That you've lost your appetite for more than just meals? That night, lying in your childhood bed, you stare at the familiar ceiling and feel like the most profound stranger who ever lived. The artificial man, learning to walk again. The prosthetic arrives 2 weeks later, delivered by a man who travels the region fitting artificial limbs to veterans. It's better than you expected, not the crude peg leg of old wars, but an articulated device with a knee joint that allows a more natural gait. The socket is carved wood lined with leather, the lower section made of ash wood with metal reinforcements. A complicated system of straps secures it to your stump and waist. Latest design, the fitter explains, helping you attach it. Based on the Palmer pattern leg, ankle joint has rubber springs for a more natural step. Government paid $40 for this, top of the line. He makes it sound like you've won a prize instead of losing a limb. Learning to use the prosthetic is its own special torture. The wood socket chafes against your tender stump, raising blisters that burst and bleed. The straps dig into your flesh, leaving angry red marks. The weight of it pulls painfully on muscles unused to such strain. Simply standing leaves you drenched in sweat, teeth gritted against the discomfort. You practice in private, in the barn where no one can witness your struggles. Fall, curse, stand, repeat. You develop calluses, both physical ones, where the prosthetic rubs, and emotional ones against the frustration and grief. Your phantom limb continues its ghostly existence, itching and cramping beneath the wooden replacement, a constant reminder of what you've lost. After a month, you can walk without crutches for short distances, though with a pronounced limp that draws eyes wherever you go. The prosthetic creaks with each step, announcing your approach before you're seen. You develop a hunched posture, shoulders curled forward from the effort of maintaining balance. You're doing remarkably well, the local doctor says during a checkup, his false enthusiasm transparent. Many men never manage this much mobility, left unsaid. Many men never leave their beds again, or take their own lives, rather than adapt to their diminished state. You've heard the whispered stories, veterans who drink themselves to death, who disappear into morphine hazes, who put their service revolvers in their mouths, rather than face decades as half-men sometimes. In your darkest moments, you understand them perfectly. The chemistry of forgetting, the veteran's little helpers. Pain becomes your constant companion, not just from your stump, but from your back, thrown out of alignment by your altered gait. From your right leg, overburdened by compensating. From your shoulders and arms, strained from using crutches. The physical agony is matched only by the psychic pain of nightmares and memories that ambush you. Without warning, the solution comes in amber glass bottles from the apothecary. Laudanum, a tincture of opium in alcohol for sleeping. Morphine powders for breakthrough pain. Cannabis tinctures for anxiety. Blue mast pills containing mercury for digestive complaints brought on by nervous tension. Take as needed for comfort. The instructions read, as if comfort was still a concept that applied to your existence. At first, you use them sparingly, only on the worst days. Then the worst days become most days. The morphine brings blessed relief, not just from physical pain, but from the constant mental noise, the memories, the sense of alienation. For a few hours after each dose, you feel almost normal, almost hold. Your family notices but says nothing. What alternatives can they offer? What right do they have to deny you this small mercy? Besides, you're hardly unique. America is awash in veterans seeking chemical oblivion. The war that introduced industrial-scale killing has spawned industrial-scale suffering, and with it, industrial-scale self-medication. Doctors call it the soldier's disease, or the army disease. This reliance on opiates that began in field hospitals and continues in peacetime. They prescribe it freely, not yet understanding the mechanisms of addiction. Some veterans spend their entire pensions on morphine or laudanum, their lives narrowing to the space between doses. You're more careful, more controlled. Just enough to function, you tell yourself. Just enough to face another day as this new version of yourself. This broken assemblage of man and wood held together by leather straps and stubborn will, the economic reality, half a man, half a wage, 6 months after your return, your father broaches the subject you've both been avoiding. Farn can't support all of us indefinitely, he says over breakfast, eyes fixed on his plate. With your brother coming home next month and the youngest nearly grown, ... Thought you might consider your options. Your options. A delicate euphemism for the harsh reality that a one-legged man has few prospects in an economy built on physical labor. Before the war, you'd apprenticed with the carpenter in town, a future of skilled work stretching ahead. Now, the idea of balancing on scaffolding or operating a saw seems impossible. The government pension for a private who lost a leg above the knee is $8 a month, enough to prevent starvation, but not enough to live independently. Some veterans sell pencils or newspapers on street corners. Others find work as night watchmen or clerks, sedentary positions that accommodate their disabilities but pay a pittance. The luckier ones, those with education or family connections, secure positions as postmasters or customs officials. The government makes some effort to employ its broken defenders, but demand far outstrips supply. You try various jobs in town: store clerk, bookkeeper at the lumber mill, toll collector at the bridge. None last. Either the physical demands prove too much for your damaged body, or your episodes of soldiers' melancholy, the vacant stares, the startled responses to loud noises, the nights without sleep, followed by days of exhaustion, render you unreliable. Not working out, the store owner says kindly but firmly after you drop an entire crate of canned goods. Your balance betraying you. Nothing personal, just need someone more ... steady. The rejections accumulate like the bottles in your dresser drawer. Each failure reinforces what you already suspect. You're no longer fully part of this world. You exist in a liminal space, between the living and the dead, between civilian and soldier, between wholeness and fragmentation. The unseen wounds, minds still on the battlefield. Physical limitations you could explain, if not overcome. It's the invisible injuries that prove most isolating. How do you describe the way a slammed door catapults you back to the battlefield? How do you explain flinching at the sound of fireworks, or waking, screaming from dreams so vivid you can smell the gunpowder? Your family walks on eggshells around you, never knowing what might trigger an episode. Your mother no longer cooks ham. After discovering the smell of frying meat reminds you of burning flesh. Your father warns visitors not to approach you from behind. Your younger siblings, once noisy and rambunctious, speak in hushed tones when you're nearby. It'll get better with time, the town doctor assures your parents when they consult him. About your condition, the memories will fade. He just needs to keep busy, not dwell on it. But the memories don't fade. If anything, they grow sharper, more intrusive. You develop routines to manage them, never sitting with your back to a door, counting your breaths when panic rises, keeping a small flask of whiskey for emergencies. Sometimes they work. Often they don't. One night, a thunderstorm sends you diving under your bed, convinced you're under artillery fire. You stay there until dawn, shaking and sweating, too ashamed to call for help. Your father finds you there in the morning, curled in a fetal position, eyes wide and unseeing. "Son," he says softly, reaching for you with weathered hands. "You're home, you're safe, but you're not safe. You'll never be safe again. The war has followed you home, taken up residence in your mind, colonized your dreams, and ambushed your waking hours. No prosthetic exists for these wounds. No miracle cure for a soul that's been shattered and imperfectly reassembled. The fellowship of the maimed, finding your tribe. Salvation comes from an unexpected source. A notice in the local paper announces a meeting of the Grand Army of the Republic, a fraternal organization for Union veterans. On impulse, you attend, limping into the meeting hall with low expectations. What you find changes everything. Men like you, missing limbs, carrying visible and invisible scars, haunted by the same memories. Men who don't need explanations or apologies. Men who understand the nightmares, the phantom pains, the complex grief for your lost self. "First time," asks a veteran missing his right arm, offering his left to shake. "Gets easier. We speak the same language here. The language of shared trauma, of gallows humor, of experiences so horrific they can only be discussed with others who've lived through them. For the first time since returning home, you find yourself laughing genuinely at jokes so dark they'd horrify civilians, but that perfectly capture the absurdity of your collective situation. Remember those hospital gangrene cases? One veteran asks, sipping whiskey from a tin cup. "I swear I could smell them from 3 wards away. Had a surgeon who'd hum Yankee Doodle while he worked." Another contributes, "Knew if he got to the 3rd verse, you were losing the limb." You add your own stories, releasing memories you've kept bottled inside for fear of disturbing your family. The men nod in recognition, offer sympathetic groans or appreciative chuckles at the right moments. No one judges, no one minimizes. No one suggests you should be over it by now. The meetings become your lifeline, a monthly respite from the exhausting performance of normalcy. Some chapters establish their own soldiers' homes, pooling resources, to care for comrades too disabled or destitute to manage alone. Others focus on securing pensions and benefits, lobbying Congress for recognition of war-related ailments that manifest years after discharge. In these men, damaged, haunted, but enduring, you find a community that accepts you exactly as you are. Not the boy who went to war, not the man you might have become in another life, but this specific iteration, half flesh, half wood, assembled from fragments of your former self and held together by shared experience. The long shadow, lifetime, medical consequences as years pass. The immediate trauma of amputation gives way to chronic complications. Your stump never fully settles, continuing to change shape and size, requiring periodic refitting of your prosthetic. The skin breaks down regularly from friction, developing ulcers that resist healing. Winter brings phantom pains so severe they leave you gasping, while summer heat causes swelling that makes wearing the prosthetic torture. Other war injuries reveal their long-term consequences. The dysentery you contracted during your 2nd year of service left your digestive system permanently compromised. The malaria recurs periodically, bringing fevers and chills that confine you to bed for days. The mercury treatments administered in the hospital have left your kidneys damaged, your hands occasionally trembling with fine tremors. Most insidious are the effects of the morphine you still take as needed. Constipation, clouded thinking, gradually increasing tolerance that requires larger doses for the same relief. You're careful, more careful than many veterans who slide into full addiction, but dependency shapes your days nonetheless. The hours are measured not in clock time, but in the waxing and waning of pain, the intervals between doses. New medical complications emerge that even the army doctors didn't anticipate. The prosthetic's unnatural gait throws your spine out of alignment, leading to degenerative changes in your back and hips. The constant pressure on your stump causes bone spurs to develop. Overuse of your right leg results in joint problems that make walking increasingly difficult. By your 40th birthday, an age that once seemed impossibly distant from the young man who went to war, you walk with 2 canes on your bad days, the prosthetic more hindrance than help. On your good days, you manage with a single cane and the articulated wooden leg, though each step remains a negotiation between pain and forward progress. Doing better than most, your doctor pronounces during a checkup, a statement that speaks volumes about the condition of other veterans from your cohort. Many have already died from complications of their wounds, from diseases contracted during service, from suicide when the burdens became too heavy to bear. You've survived, but survival, you've learned, is a complicated achievement with costs of its own. The nation's reckoning, how war changed medicine, while you and thousands like you struggle with your private aftermath. The medical profession undergoes its own transformation. The Civil War, with its unprecedented scale of suffering, has forced advancements that might otherwise have taken decades. Ambulance systems, developed by Letterman during the Peninsula Campaign, become models for civilian emergency services. Hospital design evolves based on lessons learned in pavilion hospitals, with emphasis on ventilation and sanitation. The medical record system, created out of necessity to track hundreds of thousands of patients, influences hospital administration nationwide. Surgery advances rapidly, the sheer volume of cases providing experience that peacetime could never offer. Specialization increases, with doctors focusing on orthopedics, facial reconstruction, or neurology based on their wartime practice. Anesthesia administration becomes more sophisticated, dosages more carefully calculated. Even prosthetic technology improves, driven by demand from thousands of amputees. Your original government-tissued leg is eventually replaced by newer models with better articulation, lighter materials, improved suspension systems. The American Plan limb becomes famous worldwide for its sophisticated design, a dubious distinction. For a nation that has created so many amputees, it excels at replacing their limbs. Perhaps most significantly, nursing emerges as a respectable profession for women. Clara Barton, Dorothea Dix, and thousands of others who served in field hospitals and wards demonstrated conclusively that women belong in medicine. Nursing schools open across the country, their curricula informed by wartime experience. The war that nearly destroyed the nation has, paradoxically, advanced its medical knowledge by decades. Cold comfort for those who paid the price of this progress with their bodies and minds, but a legacy that will benefit generations to come. The final march, aging with war's wounds, the years pass, marked by the steady rhythm of your cane against floorboards, the creak of your prosthetic, the rattle of pills in bottles. Your hair thins and grays, your face lines with age and pain. The 19th century gives way to the 20th, horses to automobiles, gas lamps to electric lights. America changes around you, industrializing and expanding the nation you fought to preserve, becoming something you barely recognize. New wars come, the Spanish-American conflict, small compared to your war, but generating its own broken men. Then the Great War in Europe, with weapons of destruction that make even Civil War battlefields seem quaint. You watch young men march off with the same naive enthusiasm you once felt, knowing what awaits them but unable to convey the reality in words they can comprehend. Some veterans try, offering warnings that fall on deaf ears. The young believe in their own immortality, just as you once did. The cycle continues unbroken. Your generation of veterans dwindles. Memorial Day parades feature fewer and fewer old men in faded blue uniforms. Reunions at battlefield sites attract smaller crowds each year. The nation that once celebrated you as heroes has largely moved on, relegating your war to history books and monument inscriptions. In moments of clarity between pain and medication, you wonder what it was all for. The suffering, the sacrifice, the lifelong aftermath. Was preserving the Union worth the price paid in blood and ongoing agony? Does anyone remember or care about the men who gave their bodies and minds to this? Then comes a letter from a young medical student, requesting an interview for his thesis on the long-term effects of war injuries. He's studying advances in prosthetic design and rehabilitation, he explains, hoping to better serve veterans of the recent European conflict. You agree to meet him, this earnest young man with his notebook and modern ideas. He examines your stump with clinical interest, asks detailed questions about your experiences in field hospitals and recovery wards. His lack of sentimentality is refreshing after decades of either pity or heroic mythology. The data from Civil War amputees has been invaluable, he tells you, packing away his notes. Your generation's suffering hasn't been wasted. We've learned so much about recovery, about phantom limb syndrome, about long-term adaptation. The men coming back from France will have better care because of what happened to you and your comrades. It's not redemption or justification for what you've endured. Nothing could be, but it's something, a thread connecting your experience to future generations. A purpose retrospectively assigned to purposeless suffering that night. You dream not of battlefields, but of hospital wards filled with light, of doctors with clean hands and sterile instruments, of wounded men receiving care that would have seemed miraculous in your war. You wake with tears on your cheeks, unsure if they're from grief for what you lost or gratitude for what others will gain. Your war never really ended. It lives in your altered body, in your medicated mind, in your nightly battles with memories that refuse to fade. But perhaps its echoes will diminish for those who follow, each generation's medical knowledge building on the hard-won lessons of the last, each cohort of broken men receiving better care than the one before. It's not enough. It can never be enough. But as you swallow your morning dose of morphine and prepare to strap on your wooden leg for another day of limited mobility and managed pain, you allow yourself to hope that somewhere, someday, a wounded soldier might suffer less because you suffered more. You survived. The war is over. The aftermath continues until your final breath. Sleep tight, soldier. Your service isn't forgotten.